arms, eager and alive as it thumped with the same beat that pounded in his own chest. "My life's work," said Damien, lips curling at the corners and thin black brows narrowing. "It is finally complete." He was 27. Climbing many stories of railingless stone steps out of the depths of a cold and unforgiving earth is difficult enough, and after draining oneself of nearly all of one's lifeblood, it would be nigh impossible for even an adept mage of most arcane arts. But Damien compelled not fire nor earth, nor even the arcana of something as trivial as luck. None of those so-called gifts bestowed by the gods. Damien was a blood mage, not blessed but cursed by his infernal heritage, though he saw no evidence of misfortune provided he did not look too hard. And blood mages were not merely gifted arcana, but had it flowing through their very veins. This, and he was spurred on by one fact. He had finally done it. Many times he had climbed out of that dark chasm, a pit he had constructed to contain and coalesce his too often tempestuous powers, with only bitter failure. There was sometimes progress, though more often frustration with how close he came to his own death with little to show for it. But this... He ran his thumb over the newly smooth incarnate ore, no longer unrefined earth and a pile of components, but now an enchanted talisman. This was what success felt like, and it felt wobbly. Damien ascended the last step out of the chasm and staggered, reaching out to grip the archway that would lead back into the halls of Bloodthorne Keep, but his fingers slipped. He sucked in a breath, the world falling out from beneath him, vision tunneling, and then darkness. No, not darkness, noxcura. Damien was standing straight again, hand gripping the archway as if he had never missed. He focused on a sconce, a skeletal hand clutching a thick black candle to keep the corridor from spinning, and he filled his lungs with the warmer air of the keep. He hadn't summoned the noxcura, but it came anyway. He didn't like that, but seeing as he hadn't plunged 100 feet downward into the pit at his back, he pushed the unease at his magic working autonomously away, and with it went a second, deeper unease, one he couldn't quite place. Damien was rarely, if ever, vulnerable in such a way. Expending so much arcana and leaving himself drained was never an option save for in crafting the talisman, and that weakness must have been the kindling for the sudden disquiet in his gut. He simply needed to heal. The many cuts he had made along his chest and arms were still fresh, and though they had stopped weeping, remained open. He placed a hand over his ribs where the largest gash sliced through taut skin, and he mustered a pulse of magic. It prickled painfully, worse than when the cuts had been made, sewing itself closed along half of its length. If there had been fewer wounds, and he hadn't been so arcanely spent, his body's innate ability as a blood mage to mend itself would have taken care of things on its own. But as it was, this mess needed more skilled attention. It would all be easy enough to heal for someone else, someone who had spent their life studying the curative arts and was blessed by some god. But Damien had little time or use for most medicinal magic. Instead, he had dedicated his life to a different kind of arcana, the kind that enchanted and compelled. And he finally had the talisman to justify his many years of toil. Damien swept through Bloodthorne Keep to the makeshift temple he had established in one of the castle's wings that also served as an infirmary. It was useful to have healers on hand when one was so overzealous with a dagger, and the object of devotion didn't matter. There were plenty of dark gods to choose from, 25 to be exact, and since they were all locked in the abyss, they didn't much mind which of them got the most attention. Or no one heard their complaints if they did. When he arrived in his bloodied